few months ago, I decided to explore some abandoned places. I love photography and nature, but this urban exploration thing was new for me. I wanted to capture the stories that these forgotten spaces held. I parked my car outside a dilapidated warehouse. It loomed over me, dark and eerie. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through shattered windows. Dust swirled in the air around me. It was quiet, except for the sound of my footsteps on the cracked concrete. As I moved deeper, I heard a metallic clang in the distance. I froze. Was it the building settling? Another explorer? My heart raced, and the hairs on my neck stood up. I dismissed it, telling myself to relax. I even laughed nervously. Shadows flickered on the walls, but I convinced myself it was just my imagination. I left the warehouse feeling uneasy, but I wasn't ready to go home yet. My next stop was the old amusement park. I hoped to find an interesting shot of the rides covered in weeds. The rusty gates creaked as I entered. A chill crawled up my spine, but I pressed on. The rides towered over me like silent giants. The Ferris wheel was still, lost in overgrowth. Then I heard it, a creaking sound coming from the carousel. My heart raced as I glanced over, and it swayed slightly. There was no wind. I squinted, hoping to explain it away, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I stepped back, my hands clammy on my camera. I took a few pictures, but the feeling of being alone was sinking deeper. Finally, I left the amusement park and headed to the crumbling mansion. I'd heard stories about it being haunted, and just standing outside gave me chills. I pushed open the broken front door, and it splintered under my touch. Inside, it was dark. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. That's when I heard the whispers. I thought they were in my head at first, but they grew clearer, sending a chill through me. I moved towards a dusty mirror on the wall. For a moment, I thought I saw something behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. My heart raced, cold sweat forming on my back. A small part of me wanted to run out of there. When I finally left the mansion, my mind was racing. I couldn't shake the thoughts. Were the noises real? Had I imagined them? Each place left me questioning my own sanity. The encounters haunted me. I still think about them often. Did I really see or hear something in those places? I have no idea. And maybe that uncertainty is what scares me the most. Those abandoned places still leave me wondering, whispering questions into the silence of my mind. The next week, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to return to those places. The thrill of exploration battled with my unease. I found myself driving back to the amusement park. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that felt pregnant with anticipation. I wanted to document the eeriness in the fading light. As I parked my car, I glanced around. The park seemed even more forlorn than before. The rides looked skeletal against the dimming sky. I pushed through the rusted gates, trying to ease the tightness in my chest. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. I aimed my camera at the carousel, hoping to capture its haunting beauty. Suddenly, a low groan echoed from atop the Ferris wheel. I jumped and spun around, but the park was still. No one else was there. Swallowing hard, I stepped toward the Ferris wheel, my heart pounding. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground was trying to keep me from approaching. I glanced up at the rust-caked seats hanging in the air. That's when I heard laughter. It was faint but unmistakable. I froze, unsure if I should call out or retreat. It sounded playful, like children. But there was no one around. I took a step back, breathing heavily. The laughter faded into silence, leaving me even more unsettled. I raised my camera again, hoping to distract myself. I turned away from the wheel and moved toward the old ticket booth. Broken glass crunched beneath my shoes. Inside, remnants of tickets were scattered like forgotten memories. I looked around, but felt the same creeping sensation I had before. An uncomfortable awareness that I was not alone washed over me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted something on the ground. It was a photograph, old and curled. I picked it up, heart racing again. It showed a family on the carousel, smiling. They seemed so happy, but something about the picture felt off. Every face was marked with a dark shadow. When I looked up, the atmosphere had changed. The air felt thick, suffocating. I glanced back at the carousel. It was still. But as I turned away, I heard that soft laughter again, this time closer. My breath hitched as I swung my flashlight back towards the noise. And then I saw them, shadows darting just beyond my beam, laughing and playing like they were in a game. The chill went deeper than bone. I turned on my heel and sprinted for the exit, my mind racing. Had I imagined the children? Where had they gone? As I reached the gate, I glanced back. The laughter was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. But the photograph dropped from my hand and fluttered to the ground. In that moment, I knew I shouldn't have come back. Something was very wrong. The chilling sensation of being watched enveloped me as I drove away. I thought I returned to understand those places, yet now I was entangled in something far beyond my comprehension. Questions flooded my mind, leaving only confusion and fear. What was happening there? And was I truly alone? I had to find out. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadows and heard the laughter. It clawed at me until, just before dawn, I decided I had to speak to someone. I drove back to the town nearby to find the old man I had seen during my previous visit. He had been sitting on a bench watching the park with hollow eyes. He seemed to know something. Pulling into the small parking lot of the diner, I felt the weight of my decision. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. The smell of coffee wafted through the air, but it felt stale, like the past clinging to every surface. I spotted him in the corner booth. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. "You again," he said, voice gravelly. "Why are you back?" I need to know about the amusement park," I stammered. "There's something going on there. I heard laughter. I saw shadows. They felt wrong." His eyes narrowed, and he sank lower in his seat. "You shouldn't talk about that," he murmured, glancing around as if the shadows would hear him. "It's not safe. You don't belong there." "I can't shake the feeling that I need to figure it out," I pressed. "What happened there?" He hesitated, then leaned closer. "Something tragic happened years ago. A fire. A lot of people didn't make it out. They say the park keeps their spirits trapped, reliving their last moments. Kids playing, not knowing." A shudder ran through me. The laughter, those shadows, they were kids. But why would they be there? Can't they move on? His face darkened. "Sometimes they can't. They get twisted. Not everyone goes peacefully. There's something darker lurking within those walls, feeding off the pain." "Darker?" I asked, heart racing. He shook his head, exhaling slightly. "Look, you'd be wise to leave it be. Some places should stay forgotten." But the fear only piqued my curiosity. I had to confront it. "But what if I can help them?" He frowned. "You'd only make it worse." After a few more minutes of anxious conversation, I left the diner, his warnings ringing in my ears. Fear warred with determination. I needed to go back. Back at the park, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows again. The memories of our conversation lingered. I still felt like something was watching. As I stepped through the gates, the distant laughter tingled at the edges of my consciousness. Clenching my fist, I headed straight for the carousel. This time, I would demand answers. I would not run. But as I approached, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The photograph was there, lying on the ground, as if it had followed me. And beside it, a small handprint smudged with dirt marked the ground. The air felt electric. I spun around, heart hammering. I had to get out. But then, from behind me, I heard a soft voice echo, "Come play with us." I turned, breathless, ready to face whatever haunted that park. I stood still, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice had been so clear, like a whisper carried by the wind. "Come play with us." I wanted to scream, to run, but the pull was too strong. The shadows around me shifted, deepening, as if they were eager to swallow me whole. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. Just the laughter, echoing softly, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. It felt like a game, and I was the unwitting participant. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of movement, any figure that might emerge from the gloom. The carousel stood ominously in the center, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop. The vibrant colors had dulled over time, yet the scene held a strange allure. "Is anyone here?" I repeated, more to convince myself than anyone else. I stepped closer to the carousel, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It seemed alive, breathing through the rust of its gears. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. A flash of movement on the far side of the rides. I turned sharply, but it was gone. My mind raced. Fear battled curiosity, as I wondered if it was one of those trapped spirits, longing for someone to notice them. "Please, come play," the voice called again, sweet and innocent, yet laced with an unsettling undertone. I felt it tugging at my resolve, calling me closer. It was like a siren song, urging me to take one more step. "No!" I shouted, trying to regain control. My instinct urged me to leave, to follow the old man's warning. But part of me wanted to know. Why were they trapped? What was so dark that they couldn't escape? Just as I was about to turn back toward the entrance, the ground trembled beneath me. I looked down, and that's when I saw it. A small, wooden toy, half buried in the dirt near the carousel. It was a tiny figure, resembling a child, with big round eyes and a painted smile. My pulse quickened. The park was alive with the echoes of their last joy. "Where did you come from?" I whispered to the toy, kneeling down to pick it up. As I touched it, a sudden rush of images flooded my mind. Laughter, screams, chaos. I saw flashes of flames, shadows dancing in panic. The laughter turned to cries, twisting and mixing until all I could hear was the piercing sound of despair. I gasped and dropped the toy as if it burned me. Panic surged through my veins and I stumbled backward. The shadows began to swirl, darkening the air around me. "Play with us!" The voice was louder now, frantic, echoing as if the very walls of the park were crying out. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. The shadows took shape, forming figures that hovered just beyond the carousel's reach. Their faces, once innocent, twisted with anguish. I could feel their longing, their need. They were trapped. "Get away!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. I needed to run, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the ground. The laughter escalated into a cacophony. I could feel the weight of their despair wrapping around me. Then everything went dark. The darkness was thick, as if it had a weight all its own. I could feel it pressing against my skin, my heart racing faster than ever. Just as panic started to consume me, the shadows around me seemed to dissipate, pulling back like a tide. I blinked, the scene shifting before my eyes. The carousel was gone. In its place stood an old, crumbling building, its walls cloaked in ivy, peeking through the dim light filtering in from above. My breath caught in my throat. Where was I? "Hello?" I called out uncertainly. The air was heavy with silence, except for the faint creaking of wood. I turned on my heel, scanning the dilapidated room. Broken furniture lay scattered about, and dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Then I heard it again. Laughter. It echoed off the walls, and I felt my stomach drop. It sounded so familiar, but it was different now, almost mocking. "Come play," the voice taunted. I glanced around, searching for the source, but only shadows stared back at me. This was a different space, yet it felt deeply connected to the last. A chill ran down my spine. I remembered the figures from before, their faces twisted in anguish. Were they somehow here with me in this empty place? I stepped forward into the room, compelled by a force I could barely understand. The laughter grew louder, mixing with something darker. A door on the far side of the room creaked ajar. My hand instinctively moved toward it, drawn in like a moth to a flame. "Don't go," I whispered to myself. I hesitated for a moment, the air thick with tension. But then, the laughter took on a new, frantic edge. "Come on! Come on!" It was like they were cheering me on, urging me to step closer to the unknown. Gathering what little courage I had left, I edged toward the door. Just as I reached for the handle, the floorboards groaned, as if protesting my movement. It was unnerving, but I pushed the door open. The sight beyond it made my breath hitch. A narrow staircase spiraled down into darkness, descending into the belly of the building. The laughter echoed up to me, more desperate now. "Please, don't leave us." I hesitated again. I had to turn back. I wanted to escape that haunting voice, but something was different this time. As I stared down the stairway, a faint light flickered at the bottom, glowing like a beacon. I remembered the toy, the faces of the trapped children, their pleas for help. Maybe they needed me to discover the truth behind their anguish. With a deep breath, I took a step down. Each creaking step felt like a countdown. The laughter dimmed, almost as if it had been interrupted. I reached the last step and peered into the small, dimly lit room. That's when I saw it. A faded photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. In it, a group of children stood smiling under the carousel, their faces shining with happiness. But their eyes, there was something in their eyes that sent a chill through me. I stepped closer, trying to read the name scribbled beneath. As I leaned in, the photograph warped, twisting. The laughter returned, now mingled with sobs. I stumbled back, heart racing. Someone was watching me from the shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just uncovered a nightmare far worse than I had imagined. I stood frozen, heart pounding against my ribs. The photograph had shifted in front of me, its unsettling transformation weaving new threads of fear into my mind. Panic clawed at my throat. I swept my eyes around the room once more, the dim light casting flickering shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a soft sound broke through the heavy silence. A whisper, almost indistinguishable, floated through the air. "Help us!" My stomach tightened. It felt like a knife twisting inside me. The laughter had changed. Now it was tinged with sorrow, a plea that cut deep. I needed to get out of this place. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was fear and desperation. But before I could turn away, I noticed a glint on the floor beside the staircase. I leaned down, brushing away dust with my fingers to reveal a small, rusted key. Its surface was rough, almost as if it had been buried for ages. Something told me it was important, but I didn't want to stay any longer to figure out how it could be used. I grabbed it, shoving it into my pocket as I darted back toward the door. But there was no way I could go back the way I came. The air felt thick, almost tangible, like a living entity. The whispers grew louder now, layered over each other, all pleading. "Come help us," they chorused. My hands shook as I pushed through the door and backed into the main room. The shadows were shifting again, swirling around corners and edges. The atmosphere felt electric, crackling with anticipation, and something deep in me knew that I had to find the source of the voices. But the moment I turned my gaze away from the staircase, the air felt different. A low creaking filled the room, as if the building itself was alive. I spun back around, and my breath caught again. The staircase was gone. In its place was an impenetrable wall of darkness, leaving me stranded. "Why don't you stay?" the childlike voices echoed. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble, shifting with some hidden purpose. They sounded familiar and distant all at once. I pressed a hand against the wall, shaking with uncertainty. And then it hit me. A fleeting memory of the carousel, the children laughing, their faces illuminated with joy. I recalled their expressions had changed to something darker when the photograph warped. Were they warning me about something? I didn't have time to ponder. The floorboards let out a groan, and I felt a presence shift behind me. I turned, my pulse raging as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a child, pale, with hollow eyes that seemed to pull me closer. I could hardly breathe. A wave of emotions washed over me. I knew I couldn't run now, yet my instincts screamed at me to flee. "What do you want?" I choked out, feeling small and vulnerable. "Help us find peace," the boy whispered. The shadows coiled around him, almost protecting him or perhaps consuming him. Suddenly the room went dark again. and I heard the laughter once more, not from the boy, but from all around me. It echoed menacingly, and I felt a cold grip on my arm as I stumbled back against the wall. I had no idea what to do, but as the laughter peaked into a frenzy, the rusted key in my pocket felt impossibly heavy. It seemed like the only way forward, a way to unlock whatever this nightmare had in store for me. But would I find help, or hasten their suffering? I had no choice but to find out. I took a deep breath, the cold air biting against my skin. The boy's voice echoed in my mind, and I felt a mixture of dread and urgency. I had to act, but where to begin? I fumbled in my pocket for the key, its rough edges digging into my fingers. I had no idea what it might unlock, but I had the sense it was tied to the whispers, the laughter that danced on the edge of fear. As I stood there, I focused on the darkness where the staircase had been. The shadows were restless, shifting around me like a living thing. I stepped closer, my heart racing, and spotted a faint outline, a door. It seemed improbable, yet the closer I got, the clearer it became. It was a door covering the wall of darkness, its wood warped and barely visible. With shaking hands I approached it. The laughter had quieted, replaced by an eerie stillness. I placed my palm against the door, and it felt warm, as if it were alive. I knew that I had to try the key. Was this the source of the voices? I steadied myself, inserted the key into the rusted lock and turned it slowly. A sharp click rang through the silence and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage that dipped downward. A chill swept over me as I glanced back at the room. The shadows seemed to swirl in disappointment, as if I had chosen to abandon them. I stepped into the darkness, gripping the railing that appeared out of nowhere. The air was colder here, weighting heavily on my chest. The passage was winding, and I felt a push from behind, urging me forward into the unknown. My mind raced with questions. Would I find peace, or would I stumble deeper into torment? As I descended, whispers began again, rising and falling like a tide. Join us. Help us, they begged. Fear prickled my skin, but I pressed onward, each step reverberating against the walls. Ahead I saw a flickering light. I quickened my pace, emerging into a small, dimly lit room. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by an old lantern that flickered weakly. In the center of the room was a table covered with an assortment of trinkets, broken toys, twisted dolls, and a mirror that seemed to murmur with trapped memories. I edged closer, drawn by an unseen force. As I examined the dolls, my eyes settled on a small figure. A doll resembling the boy from earlier, pale with hollow eyes staring back at me. I shuddered, remembering the boy's plea. I reached for the doll, preparing to lift it, but a sudden crash reverberated through the room. I spun around, heart pounding. The door I had entered through slammed shut, the darkness pouring back into the space around me, swallowing the flickering light whole. Help us! The whispers rose in pitch, growing frantic. I backed away from the table, my breath quickening. Someone, or something, was in the room with me. That's when I saw it. A shadow moved in the corner, flickering just out of reach. I felt a cold hand grasp my shoulder, and I gasped, frozen in panic. Find us! The hushed voice echoed, louder now, drowning out my thoughts. In that moment I understood. I was not just here to help them. I was part of a story that was far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I jolted at the sound of the voice, the cold hand sinking deeper into my flesh as I spun around to face the darkness. My breath caught. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt glued to the floor. The shadows shifted closer, thickening around me. Who are you? I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. Find us, the voice repeated, softer this time, yet urgent like a whisper carried on the wind. The shadow flickered, revealing a glimmer of eyes. Lost, pleading. My heart ached as if I could feel its desperation. Why? What do you want from me? I dared to ask, my mind racing with possibilities. The boy's voice echoed in my thoughts. This was no ordinary plea. It was a cry for help. The cold hand slowly released me, and I staggered back into a wall of shadows. Auroras of memories washed over me, visions of children glimpsing through the cracks of a once bright world. Instinct kicked in, and I scanned the room for a way out. The door was still shut, panic twisting inside me. "Please, help us!" A chorus of voices mingled, echoing off the walls. I had to do something. "Were you trapped here too?" I asked, desperate for a connection. "Who did this?" A figure stepped closer, but just as quickly as it appeared, the light from the lantern flickered wildly, plunging the room into darkness. I felt a rush of wind, like someone had charged past me. I turned, heart racing, but the space was empty once more. Then, something caught my attention on the table. The mirror. It hummed softly, pulsing in sync with the whispers. Drawn to it, I crept forward, brushing past the toys scattered like lost hopes. As I approached, the mirror's surface rippled, reflecting not just my muddled form but flashes of scenes. A sullen boy with hollow eyes, a glimmer of the very room I stood in, and then, a flash of terror. Images of the shadows reached out to me, faces twisted in anguish. They weren't just lost children, they were trapped souls. I gasped, stepping back. Something was very wrong. The laughter I'd heard earlier was no longer playful. It had become an echo of torment. But as I turned, the door behind me warped, as if pulled by an unseen force. It began to shake. I blinked once, twice, and it burst open, revealing an even darker corridor. My heart raced, and instinct took over. I couldn't stay here. With feeble courage, I sprinted toward the door. Cold air rushed around me, the whispers escalating in a fevered pitch. "Don't go," they cried, their voices rising like a chaotic storm. I stumbled through the doorway, feeling the air shift. Suddenly, the echoes grew distant, muffled. I paused, catching my breath, but the passage before me was quiet now, unnaturally so. Standing at the threshold, I felt a new heaviness, a change in energy. I wasn't safe yet. I was merely at the beginning of something much worse. That's when I noticed a note pinned to the wall, the corners flapping in the cold draft. I reached for it, and as I read the first line, chills cascaded down my spine. "I can't remember. I can't forget. They have my heart." Everything shifted. I had to know who they were, or risk being lost to the shadows forever. I stepped cautiously into the dark corridor, the air thick with uncertainty. The quiet was unsettling. It felt like the calm before a storm. My instinct told me to keep moving, but each step was heavy with dread. The note haunted me. Who had written it? What did they mean? As I walked deeper into the passage, I noticed a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I turned quickly, heart racing, but found nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. I couldn't let the fear paralyze me. The dim light from behind me dwindled, swallowed by the darkness of the hallway. I had no choice but to keep pushing forward. Soon, the walls narrowed, closing in like a vice. My fingers brushed against the rough surface as I moved, searching for something, anything, that could lead me to answers. Then, to my left, I spotted another door slightly ajar. It was old and worn, the wood warped like the faces I had glimpsed in the mirror. My heartbeat quickened. Curiosity battled against caution. Should I enter? Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. As it creaked, a strong gust rushed out, throwing the door wide. I stumbled into the room, landing awkwardly on the dusty floor. I quickly scrambled to my feet, glancing around. The atmosphere was oppressive. The fading light from outside barely illuminated the corners, revealing stacks of forgotten furniture, a table draped in white sheets, chairs toppled over, and a tall armoire looming against the wall. But it was the center of the room that drew my attention. A small round table covered with photographs. I approached it, each picture revealing a distorted glimpse of joy, laughter, and families now lost. Faces were obscured with black ink or scratched out entirely. Among them was a photo of a boy with deep-set eyes. He looked familiar. I squinted, but before I could place him, the air crackled again. From behind the armoire, a low whisper spread through the room. "Help us. Find us." It was the same haunting chorus from before, cold and pleading. A shiver ran down my spine as I looked around, but I was alone. "Who are you?" I called, frustration bubbling within me. "What do you want?" The response was immediate. A strong vibration pulsed through the floor and I staggered, trying to regain my balance. Then, the armoire suddenly shifted, moving as if something, or someone, was pushing it aside. My breath hitched. Fighting against the paralyzing fear, I stepped closer. What was hidden behind it? I had to know. The whispers grew louder, echoing as if the walls themselves were alive. "Help us." As the armoire finally crashed to the ground, I gasped. It revealed a hidden doorway, dark and beckoning. Fear surged, constricting my throat. This was it, my chance to uncover the truth. Before I could think, I reached for the door, my fingers trembling. Just as I touched the handle, another rush of wind swept through the room, slamming the door behind me with a resounding bang. The darkness thickened around me, swallowing the last remnants of light. Driven by determination, I pushed the door open, ready to face whatever awaited me. But as I stepped inside, I froze. My eyes widened in horror. I wasn't alone anymore. I found myself surrounded, not by shadows, but by figures, pale and translucent, their faces twisted in despair. They reached for me, hands stretching out as if I were their only salvation. "You're here," they murmured. "Will you stay?" The air thickened with tension, and I knew then, I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. The room pulsed with a heavy silence, filled only by the low collective whispering of shadows turned sour. Those figures, lost souls with hollow eyes, hovered close, their faces a haunting blend of anguish and desperate hope. "Will you stay?" they murmured, their voices weaving together, creating a symphony of longing that echoed through the darkness. I stumbled back, the weight of their plea pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. "I can't stay," I gasped, shaking my head vigorously. I had already lost so much in this wretched place. "What do you want from me?" The figures drew closer, their expressions swelling with desperation. "We're trapped. Help us find peace," one voice pleaded, fragile like glass. My heart ached at their plight, an overpowering urge to save them coursed through me. But how? A shattered thought flickered. It was the key in my pocket. Perhaps it held the answer to unlocking not just a door, but a path to their freedom. Clenching my fists, I gathered my courage and addressed the ghostly crowd. "What if I have something that can help? If I find the right door, will you be free?" Their response was a cacophony of whispers, a whirlwind of hope and uncertainty. "Yes, find it, unlock it," they urged, their movements animated, eyes alight with anticipation. With renewed determination, I scanned the room, chest tightening with urgency. No visible door, no obvious keyhole in sight. My mind raced back to the photographs on the old table, a clue I must have missed. I turned back, the figures parting to create a clear path for me. I approached the table and rifled through the photos, the cold touch of despair lingering in the air. Then I spotted it. The boy had been in another snapshot, stood beside a girl with bright, lively eyes, both of them smiling under the now decayed carousel. Their joy felt palpable through the image, accented by the chain of innocence that shrouded their spirits. But one photo caught my eye. Both children, faces obscured by ink, stood framed in front of the gray walls of the amusement park's haunted attractions. Beneath it was a date, the day the fire had broken loose. Could this lead to their release? "Find the door," the whispers guided fervently. Without hesitation, I turned back to the haunted shadows. "Where's the door? The door that will set you free?" Suddenly, one figure stepped forth, a girl, delicate and ethereal, with tears glistening in her translucent eyes. "We don't know," she whispered, quivering. "But follow the light." Before I could question further, a shimmer flickered in the air above me, beckoning like a distant echo. I squinted into the dark, and there it was, a glimmer that broke through the thick murk. I found myself moving toward it, each step light yet heavy with the intensity of the moment. The figures encircled me, their hope illuminating the path as I reached the flickering light. "This way," they murmured in unison, urgency staining the air. Finally, I stood before what appeared to be a small arch, a door made of shimmering dust and fragments of light. It flickered uncertainly, a void of hope and fear mingling together. "This is it," I gasped, the overwhelming loneliness of seconds stretched into an eternity. Gingerly, I pulled the key from my pocket and approached the door. My fingers tingled, a surge of energy coursing through me as I inserted the rusty key into the lock. It turned with a resounding click, and for a moment, the world paused. As the door creaked open, brilliant light flooded the space, sweeping away the shadows like an unwelcome shroud. The figures, now luminous, stepped closer, their expressions shifting from despair to something like joy. "Go," the girl urged softly, eyes glistening. "Find peace." Without another thought, I stepped through, the air thickening behind me as I crossed into the light. For a fleeting moment, I could feel the warmth of their gratitude washing over me. Then the world shattered into a kaleidoscope of colors, wrapping me in a cocoon of brilliance until everything darkened. I awoke in the dim light of morning, sprawled across the dirt outside the amusement park. My heart hammered. I bolted upright and looked around, breathless. The park appeared unchanged, a ghost from the night before. But I felt alive, renewed. Far behind me, where the opulent gates stood once, a faint echo of laughter lingered, sweet yet bittersweet. The wind whispered through the trees, cradling the sounds of children lost to time. I had no idea if I had truly helped. Maybe their spirits were still trapped. Perhaps they had been freed in ways I couldn't comprehend. With that lingering ambiguity, the taste of solace shaken by sorrow, I stood there, looking back at the park. I realized some questions never quite found their answers, drifting like shadows under a fading sun. As I turned away, I felt a weight leave my shoulders, and deep inside I understood one thing clearly. I was not the same. I moved to a different city after that. I still think about those children, that laughter, and the dark echoes of the places they inhabited. I have no idea if what I experienced was real, if the spirits were truly released, or if they still wandered those shadows. But I guess I'll never know.